So first up is going to be the precious metal clay. And again, I am Cheryl Farrens. I own the studio in Northeast Texas called FireHorse Designs. I've been working in clay, glass, and photography since the 1970s, and I'm an award-winning artist and teacher. I love giving or imparting my knowledge to students and seeing where they go with it. I've had students that have competed with their pottery and they've done very, very well. But even if you never compete, just being able to make something and looking at it and saying, you know what, I just made this. And especially in this course and in these bonuses where you're using it in a microwave. And yes, you've got to have the microwave kiln. You can't just put it in a microwave. They don't get hot enough. But with a microwave kiln and a minimal cost to getting the materials, you can create some beautiful objects and you can actually start selling things. Now, the catch with precious metal clay is it's precious metal, specifically silver. You can also get gold. I've never worked with gold, quite frankly, because it's too expensive. You can also get base metal clay, which is copper and bronze. I don't work with that. I have some of the copper, but the melting point is different from that of silver. And from what I've been able to tell, it does not work well in a microwave kiln. The silver, the sterling silver, on the other hand, it's 99.5%, I believe, silver. And it's silver particles that are mixed in with a matrix that fires off when you put it in the microwave kiln. You can also torch fire it, or you can use it in a kiln that's made for metal sintering. But you know, if you've already got a microwave kiln, this is just one other way to utilize it. You can use your microwave kiln for fusing glass. You can use it for the clay, different clay techniques that I've shown in this course. And you can actually use it for melting metal, specifically silver. So first thing you do is you get out your precious metal clay. There are different grades of precious metal clay. Some of it will melt at a higher temperature than others. So if you decide you want to attempt this, make sure you get the right type of clay for what you're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my precious metal clay. It comes in a double sealed bag. Quite frankly, I bought this back, I believe, in 2007. And, you know, when I decided to teach it as a class in my bonus, my first thought was, I wonder if it's any good anymore. Yeah, you keep this stuff sealed and it's fine. And even if it dries out, don't discard it. You can rehydrate it, okay? So I added a little bit of water to this just to really get it hydrated. And so I'm just wiping it off. It's in a little plastic bag here. And I'm going to take it. I'm going to put it in. I had some plastic wrap here earlier, and I don't know what I did with it. Okay, so I'm going to go under here and pull out some plastic wrap. I'm going to take the clay and put it in the plastic wrap. And it's sticking a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and take a tool here and just ease it out. When you start working with this, if you have a metal allergy, wear gloves. But one of the things you'll notice is that it's really heavy for the amount of material you've got. And that's because of the silver that's in there. You know, this amount of regular fireable clay would not have much of a heft to it. And since this is silver, as you start working with it, like I've left some material behind in this little plastic that it was wrapped in, I'm going to keep that because I can, when it dries out, I can just scrape it into the rest of it and just keep reusing it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squeeze it and just keep working it. I'm just working the clay. That's called conditioning. And then you can do pretty much anything that we did with these so far as creating something with this. So for example, you could use this in a sprig mold, which is what I'm going to do. You could use it and roll it out and roll a pattern onto it. You could hand build with it if you wanted to. The main thing is remembering that this is expensive and you don't want to waste it and you want to keep it fairly thin, okay? I don't like doing real thin stuff, but the thinner it is, the faster it will fire, and also the less of your silver clay you're going to be using. Okay, so I'm just conditioning this. I'm leaving some of it behind on the plastic wrap. I will let that dry out and I will scrape everything back into the bag. But I've got a pretty good piece here now. And it's drying well. When I added the water to it a little while ago, I may have added just a little bit too much water. Okay. And like I said, if you've got a metal allergy, you know, in other words, you tend to break out if you handle metal. This being silver usually isn't a problem, but, you know, just wear gloves. I donated my latex gloves to my veterinarian, and so I've only got a couple of pairs left, and I saved those for really important stuff. Okay. So, as you can see, I did leave some stuff behind. I'm not going to throw this wrap out. I'm just going to let it dry, and then I'll, you know, it'll crack off, and I'll just put it back into this little bag with the other stuff that was left on this bag. All right. This particular bag of clay was 18 grams of silver, okay? And then it's a 20-gram bag, so 20 grams of binder. The binder is what holds the silver together and what burns off. So usually I will use about half a bag for a decent-sized piece. Whoop. Here we go. So I've got a little latex mold here, and it's some crosses. I've decided to go with the cross because it's got this little depression here, and I'm going to try something I haven't done before. And usually I don't do this with, you know, when I'm trying to teach a technique, but I thought, you know, let's go ahead and try it. I'm going to try to fire a gemstone into the center of the cross. And when we get to that point, I'll show you how to set the gemstone in there and how to fire it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just take my clay, and I'm going to prepare the mold. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take, I have a little bottle of oil here, or at least I did. That was the one thing I did not remember to set up. So we're going to pause for a second while I find my bottle of oil, which is somewhere in here, and then we'll prep the mold. And we're back. It turned out the oil was sitting right there. The minute I said I couldn't find it, there it was. Okay, so this is just vegetable oil. It's corn oil specifically. You can use olive oil. You just want some light grade oil. get it on a swab, and we're just going to rub it into the mold. You don't need a lot. This is just, it's going to act as a mold release. Okay, so I've oiled my mold. Now this doesn't mean you can't use this mold for other stuff. You can still use it for clay, you just wash it out with soap and water to get the oil out. Okay, I'll put that there for a second. I'm going to take my jewelry off. And I'm going to put a little bit of this corn oil onto my hands. This will keep the silver clay from sticking to my hands. And it also makes your hands nice and smooth. Okay, so now I'm going to take the clay and I'm going to press it into the mold. I've got too much, so I'm going to go ahead and just split it in half here. And I'm just going to start pressing it into the mold. If I don't have enough, I can go ahead and add a little bit more. And since we're working with silver, the back is as important as the front. So in other words, if you're making a ceramic pendant, as long as it's smooth and finished, that's fine. With a silver pendant, I usually try to use a tool to just flatten it out a little bit in the back and maybe put a channel down there, which does two things. It means you're going to use less silver, and it just makes it look finished. So when the customer comes to your table and you say, you know, well, this is sterling silver and it's hand finished, etc., they're going to turn it over. And if it doesn't look hand finished, you know, if it doesn't look beautifully finished, you may lose a sale. So all I'm doing is I'm pressing it in and I'm just making a little bit of a channel just to clean it up a little bit. Don't worry if you make a little bit of a, you know, if you have a little bit of a flange on the edges. We're going to clean this when we're done with it. And I'm picking up any of the silver I've got left, and I'm going to put it back over here. Am I going to reclaim all of the silver? No, you're going to lose some, which is one of the reasons I don't use gold clay. And I'm just making sure it's pressed into the mold. And we're just going to set that to one side and let it dry. And then we will demold it. In the meantime, I'm going to take what I have left here, put it back in the little bag. And I'm going to take what I have left here, wrap it up. Because I'm going to need a little bit more when we go to set the jewel in the channel. So I'm just going to set that right there and talk about the next step. Okay, so that's my little jewel. Some jewels, gemstones, you can fire. Some you can't, okay? Then the other thing I have here is a little Nautilus shell. This is precious metal clay that I've let dry for a week or so. So this was cast in a mold like this, and it's just been drying and it's been sitting waiting for me to fire it. Oops. And I didn't put the lid on tight on my oil, so it leaked. So I'm gonna go ahead and rub that into my hands, and you can see I've got a little mess there, but remember, I use these little urine pads for puppies. And so, yeah, it's soaked through the paper, but the plastic is keeping it from going any further. I'm going to mop it up a little bit. Yeah, from my point of view, if you've got a studio and you don't make one mess, you really haven't accomplished anything. Okay, so I'm going to wipe that off, and I'm going to put it up where it's not leaking. There, you know. Ah, right there. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about firing precious metal clay while that particular piece is setting up. Silver melts at a low temperature. So if you were to put this in your microwave kiln, set it for 5 minutes and walk away, it would melt into a puddle. You'd still have silver, but you just have a round bead of silver. I want to keep the detail on this particular little Nautilus shell. So I'm going to fire it in intervals. And I'm going to wash my fingers here for a second. And when you fire in intervals, I really mean intervals, okay? So in other words, we're going to be firing for 20-second installments for a bit. That doesn't mean, okay, well, she's doing 20 seconds, let's say 10 times. So why don't I just do it for, 20 times 10, for a minute and a half or something like that. You'd melt your silver. The intervals are going to burn away the binder in the silver, leave the silver behind, and then it's going to sinter the silver. Sinter simply means it's going to melt the silver particles so that they come together and it becomes hard, but you still have your design, okay? If you overfire it, that's when the whole thing melts and you end up with a silver blob. Should that happen, you can still recycle the silver, so don't, toss it, but it's going to be disappointing because you're not going to have the shape you wanted. Now, on this little Nautilus here, I have also put a hole because I have some silver pinch bales that I'm going to put on here so I can make a pendant out of it. So I've cleaned the hole up and it's ready to fire. So while we're waiting on this one to dry in the mold, we're going to go ahead and fire this one. So as I said, I always write down what I'm doing so I can go back and check. So the firing schedule that the person that showed me how to do this used was assuming that they had a small microwave kiln and they had a 1100 watt microwave. I've had to adjust my timing because I've got a 1000 watt microwave and I've got a bigger kiln. So it's not going to heat quite the way theirs did. And the other thing you have to do is you have to put something between your silver piece and the base of the kiln. This is fireable paper. There's different versions of it. You can get really thin stuff. You can get, this is not thick, but it's a little thicker. And it can be fired in the kiln. It will burn off. It will leave, it's also got a binder. And as you fire, it will turn a brown color, which is the binder burning off, and then it will turn into a white powder. And the white powder you don't want to inhale, so when you go to clean up afterwards, put a respirator mask on. And what I usually do is I sweep it into or gently dump it into a plastic bag, add a little bit of water to it to bind it together, and then throw it in the trash. So we're going to use this. I'm going to come over here, get our kiln, which we used a little while ago to fire the watercolor pendants. So I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to put my piece of fireable paper, and I'm going to put my little silver Nautilus in the middle. Then I'll put the lid on here, Nice thing about this, unless you really tilt it to one side, you don't have to worry about it moving anywhere. And we're going to come over to the microwave and we're going to start firing. So I'm going to pause for a moment, and when we come back, we're going to start firing in intervals. I'm wearing my protective gear. I've got my gloves on, got closed-toed shoes, and I'm wearing my eye protection. Theoretically, this is not going to get as hot, but whenever I'm working with a microwave kiln, I want to make sure that, you know, I'm taking precautions and I'm doing best practices. So the first firing is going to be 2 minutes. So time 2:00. Close the door and start. And this is all at 100%. When the fireable paper starts to burn off, it will smell. You can get different types of silver clay. You can get it as a paste that you can squeeze out of a little like syringe thing and make designs with. You can get it in sheets. You can also get it as a slip-like material, as well as what we're working with, which is the more clay type. The slip type material is nice if you want to make a pendant from, say, a leaf. You can paint layer after layer after layer of the silver onto the leaf, let it dry in between each layer, and then you can fire it and the leaf will burn off, and then you have the imprint of the leaf as a pendant. Okay, so we've had our first 2 minutes. I'm going to open the microwave and I'm going to lift the lid. What I'm doing is I'm releasing some of the heat, and then I'm going to put it back on. And now I'm going to do it for 30 seconds. So time, 30, start. There we go. Start. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off as I do these things, because it's real easy to lose track of where you are. So I've done the 2 minute. I'm doing the 30, and now I'm going to go into my 20s. Each time I'm going to lift the lid. What this is doing is it's resetting the temperature so that you're not overheating your silver. So I'm going to check it. Put the lid back on. Time 20. And I'm going to mark off the fact that I'm doing the first 20. Okay, there's 20. Open the kiln, or microwave, lift the lid. Put the lid back on. Whoop. Since I snagged my glove, I'm just going to make sure my piece didn't move. It didn't. Okay, make sure it's still sitting on all stilts. It is. Close the door. Time 20. Start. So we're going to continue that until we've used 5 minutes, and then we're going to check and see how far along we are in the process. So we'll be back.
Okay.
So I've taken it out of the microwave. I ended up doing a 10-minute cycle because this was a thicker piece, and my microwave is a lower wattage than the one that my instructor demoed on. So I'm just going to lift this so you can kind of see what it looks like. And you can see it's turned white. That's the color you want. The brown on the fire paper is just the binder burning off. So we're going to let that cool naturally for about an hour, and then I will carefully lift it. If it's fired fully, you'll be able to tell it's metal because it will sound like metal when it's tapped. If it's not fired fully, all is not lost. We just go back and start refiring it again. In the meantime, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to prep a piece for firing. So when we come back, we'll start working on the little cross. Okay, so I'm going to put a little corn oil on my hands. Again, you can use the olive oil. You know, it's just to kind of give your hands a boundary between the clay and your hands. And I'm going to take my little metal rib here, and I'm going to work the mold, and I'm going to pop the cross, hopefully, out of the mold. Oh, and I'm going to put a little bit of, just a tiny bit of oil on the rib here. This is called a rib. Just wiping that back a little bit. Put a little too much on there. You just want a thin coat. And now I'm going to pop the cross onto the rib. And hopefully you can see the cross. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on the rib, move the mold, and I'm going to take my little gemstone here. And this is a quartz, lemon quartz. And I'm going to make a little opening using a pottery tool here. Let's see here. In the center of my cross. All I'm doing is pressing down that bump that was there so that I can press the little, and this is, faceted, so it's got a pointy end, and I'm going to put the pointy end into the clay. And I'm going to try to get it centered. And as I press it in, you can see the clay's coming up over the sides. And that's good because that's what I'm going to use to make a bezel to hold the stone in place. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pointed brush, wet it with clean water, twirl it to a point, and I'm just going to use the water to seal the clay to the stone. And I'm going to push the clay a little bit over the stone. Now, if you don't have, you know, something that will make that impression that you need, you can take more of your original clay, make a real thin roll from it, and build around it. Or if you buy the paste clay that comes in a little syringe, you can spread it around. But the technique's the same. Even if you use the paste, you're going to have to build up the wall so that the stone remains seated. Now you don't want to make the wall so high that you start to obscure your stone. You just want it high enough that it holds the stone in. Then if you hold it at an angle, you can tell if your stone is actually evenly flat. I can tell one side's a little higher than the other. So now it's flat. Okay, so it's flush with the mounting. So I'm going to bring that up and hopefully you can see that it's flush with the clay. If not, take my word for it, it's flush with the clay. Sometimes it's hard to see these things, but all I've done is I've pressed it down so that it's in the precious metal clay, and now it's flush with that ring. So in other words, it's not sticking up from the clay, it's actually part of the clay now. And now all I'm doing is I'm bringing the ring of clay that it was pushed down into around it, so that when I fire it, it will become solid and it will hold that stone in place. So hopefully, if I'd had a darker colored stone, I would have gone with it. But the only round stone I had available was that lemon quartz. But hopefully you can see that I've raised that frame around it, that bezel around it, so that should hold it in place. Then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little stylus and I'm going to make a hole up here. So I will eventually have a place where I can hang a little pinch bail. And then I'm going to wet it a little bit. You know, in theory, if you don't have a built-in ring, you can just, you know, make a hole. As a matter of fact, I think I'll go ahead and do that because that's an awfully thin piece. So I'm going to take my blade. Going to cut that away. Not going to throw that away because there's silver in there. Okay, so now I've cut that little loop off because that was awfully thin. And I'm going to make a hole. Once you get skilled at this, you can actually make your own fireable bales. But I've just made a little hole there. And now I'm going to let it dry. I'm not going to fuss with it too much because it's still wet clay and I don't want to screw up the shape of the cross. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put this over here. At this stage, if you're wanting to, you could put it in that shoebox with the hair dryer. This has got so many, you know, it's got the 4 cross pieces coming off of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and let that dry, and then I'll come back and then we'll clean it and prep it for firing. And then hopefully at that point, the piece in the microwave kiln actually sintered, and I'll be able to clean that up and show you how to polish it and finish it as a pendant. So when we come back, hopefully we'll have a piece that we can go ahead and put a pinch bail on after we polished it. So I've pulled the little Nautilus out of the microwave kiln, and one of the ways to tell if it's actually sintered is pick it up and drop it like on the ceramic tile. That little metallic cling is usually a real good indicator that it fired completely and it's sintered. So if you look at it, it's kind of cool looking. You know, it's got the, and it also feels chilly, unlike the clay did. Whoop! The fact that it didn't break also. So you can see it's not silvery though. It's got white powder on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a brass brush in some soapy water. I'm going to put it in the water and I'm going to just start brushing it. Now, as I go, I'm going to show you what it's starting to look like. Hopefully you can start to see as I get the material off of it, it's starting to glisten a little bit. That's the silver coming through. I've been told that if you use a stainless steel brush instead of a brass brush that you don't need to use soapy water. I haven't actually tried that. I happen to have the brass brushes. Okay, so you can see it's definitely more metallic than it was. And frankly, had this still been raw clay, it wouldn't have held up well in the water and the brushing. But it's still not perfectly shiny. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this to one side, because when we fire across, we're going to want to do the same thing there. And I'm going to dry it off. And then if there are flaws, you can go ahead and start using sandpaper squares, and you can go from super fine to ultra fine to micro fine. And as you go down, 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 it's going to get brighter and brighter. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull these out. And I'm going to take the super fine, then I'll go to micro, then ultra. And you can see it's getting shinier. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this, and this is just a beauty salon type nail file, so you can also use that as a polishing tool, and they come in different grades as well. So if I show you the back, you can see it's really starting to shine up. Okay, it's got sort of a soft shine. If you didn't get it completely clean, you can go back to the soapy water. Because sometimes after you start polishing it, you start to see areas where, oh, okay, I didn't get all of the coating off. And to dress something like this up, you can even go ahead and put some fireable enamels on here. Okay, so see, it's really coming up nice and shiny. The finer the grit you use, the shinier it will get. So in other words, when you start out with the coarser, you're making larger scratches, and as you work your way down to the smaller, finer micro grit, that's when you really start to get the polish. And then the last step is just pull out a jewelry polishing cloth. There's different types. There's a stiffer type, which I like to use first because I can just kind of rub it on there. Okay, I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but if you look at the center of the Nautilus, you can really see that shine pop. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and keep polishing this puppy. And then I'm going to go find another polishing cloth. This one I can kind of rub it between my fingers. Now I kind of like the parts of it being a little less shiny, so I'm not going to over polish this. And you can actually polish these if you've got a jewelry tumbler, you know, that you can use one of those. Just give it a couple more wipes and then hold it up. This came out really pretty. So all I have to do on this is just put a sterling silver pinch bail on here, and it's ready to go. Okay, let's... So, this is fun. It's not a cheap way to do it, because, you know, the precious metals market is changing all the time. But, you know, for very special pieces, this is definitely a fun project to do with a microwave kiln. And as I say, depending on the size of your microwave and the size of your kiln, the timing is going to vary. So the lady that I learned PMC in a microwave from, she had a smaller kiln and a larger wattage microwave. So she was doing 15-second increments for about 5 minutes. I was doing 20-second increments, and I ended up going for 10 minutes. And which turned out for this particular piece to be perfect. So when we come back, we're going to go ahead and clean up the cross once it's dry enough, and then we'll fire the cross and see how it comes out. In this segment of our bonus course, I'm going to show you how to clean unfired precious metal clay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my dust mask on. This has got a filter system in it, so I'm just going to slide it on here. If you've got an N95 or a respirator, that works fine. I just don't want to inhale the silver particles. This has been drying. I used our little drying box, which I showed you how to build in the full course. So now I'm just going to carefully clean the edges. And I'm going to go ahead and collect the dust in a little plate, because I can recycle this if I want to, if I get enough silver dust. Okay, so just cleaning off any rough edges gently. Also, I'm cleaning the corners so they're not sharp. And I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of sandpaper, gently lay it on there, and just rub it around. Edges. And we'll just carefully do the little hole I put in there so that I don't remove the pattern that was in the mold. I'm going to take my little cleaning tool. I'm going to leave it sitting on the sandpaper so that there's a little bit of a foam backing, so that don't put too much pressure on the hole. The hole's clean, so I'm just gonna make sure it's the size I want. And I'm gonna go back and just carefully clean the top. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back down and I'm going to clean around the little stone. So I want to make sure I don't have any silver clay on top of the stone where I don't want it. In other words, I want the bezel, but I don't want little particles of clay that have just kind of fallen onto the stone. And then I'm just going to go ahead and take my brush and I've still got a little bit to clean up. And we're ready to fire. So I'm going to use the same schedule I did with the little Nautilus. Going to fire it for 2 minutes. It's a 1,000-watt microwave in a large microwave kiln. Fire it for 2 minutes on 100%, lift the lid. Fire for 30 seconds at 100%, lift the lid, and then start firing it every 20 seconds. Last time I did that for close to 10 minutes until the binder is burned off and it looks like a sort of a tan silver color instead of this clay color. So we'll go ahead and do the firing and then we'll come back and see how it comes out. So I've fired it in the kiln and I've pulled it out after it cooled down. Found out a couple of interesting things. First off, the gem that I put in here fired fine, except the yellow burned out. So that tells me that my lemon quartz was actually artificially colored. So I've just got a quartz stone, which actually looks quite nice. So I don't have a problem with that. So I haven't cleaned this yet. It's, you know, it's definitely makes a clink when I put it on the tile, but I have to clean it yet. And the other thing I discovered, I heard that bump sound again that I mentioned. It turns out the wheels on the microwave carousel are getting worn and they've got flat areas, and that's what that bumping is. So it's not actually my kiln, it's the microwave. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up and then we'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like. So I've cleaned up a lot of the cross. It's still not quite as shiny as I will make it as I keep buffing it. But you can tell, you know, the silver fired beautifully. The stone in the middle is set perfectly. And it fired other than it lost the yellow color, which actually, with the silver, I kind of like the natural color of the quartz anyway. It definitely is nice and shiny. The back side is rustic. As I was cleaning it, I just kind of made like a hammered pattern on it. And all of the edges are nice and smooth. There's no sharp points. So all I need to do is finish polishing this and put a pinch bail on it, and it's ready. So that's how you can use precious metal silver clay in a microwave kiln, and how you can also fire a stone into it. You need to use a stone that can handle being fired to high temperatures. Some stones won't handle that. And if you try it with glass, the glass will melt, which, you know, may or may not be an issue.